Okay, good morning. Welcome to this virtual Commons and Rights of Way Committee. My apologies for the slight delay to those that are possibly watching us on YouTube. I'm going to briefly hand over to Democratic Services to outline how the meeting will run. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got two applications this morning. The first one that will be considered will be presented by Juliet Walker, and it's an application for a modification order for a length of public footpath at Bussage, Chelford. And the second application is an application for a modification order for an additional footpath in Hatherley Parish in Cheltenham. So those are the two applications. The second one will be presented by Jackie Harris. So back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Starting the agenda then, apologies for absence.
Apologies received from Lorraine Patrick.
Thank you. And the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 6th of October, your pages 1 to 10. Members happy that those get virtually signed? Thank you.
That is read, Phil. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Any member have any declaration of interest?
Yes. Simon Wheeler's indicating, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, it's a personal but non-prejudicial interest in the application in Up Hatherley. I did help the parish council insofar that I told them where they go and how the process worked, but I hadn't had any dealings with the application other than that.
Thanks, Simon. Moving on to public questions on applications.
None received.
None. And member questions on
none received.
No. Then we go to the first item of our business, which is, as Simon said, this will be presented by Juliet Walker. Over to you, Juliet.
Good morning, councillors. As you'll all be aware, this is my first presentation, so do forgive me if there's a few nerves for this one. So, Joe could open up that first slide. Can you go to full screen, Joe?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work that out.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay.
So this application is for an additional public footpath in the parish of Chelford in Stroud District and was submitted to GCC to investigate on the 17th of November 2018 by Chelford Parish Council and is supported by 22 user evidence statements. We will also be looking at documentary evidence discovered by the officer, which also supports the application and indicates that there may be an anomaly between the definitive map and statement with regard to this path. So the area, as we can see on this slide, it's located roughly 2.6 miles east of the centre of Stroud, and the area of the claimed route is shown within the red box area on this map. So if you go to the next slide. Joe, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the claimed route is shown on this plan by the red picked line between points A and C and is immediately west of Frithwood and north of Bussage Recreation Ground. It connects the Class 4 highway in the south at point A to an existing public footpath numbered MCH 13 in the north at point C. It is also joined by a Class 6 pathway from the west, which joins the claimed route at point B from Velhurst Drive. We'll next look at the photos of this path. So if we could go on to the next slide, please, Joe. So here we are starting at point A, the southern end of the path, where there is a low stone wall where the path joins a Class 4 highway verge. This is also the narrowest spot on this path, with a pinch point in the wall measuring 48 centimetres wide. This then opens up to a boundary-to-boundary width of 2 metres, where the path is bounded on both sides by fence, stone walls, or hedges, which form the garden boundaries adjacent to the path. The surface of this path is formed of loose stone with grass either side. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Joe. So about 39 metres along the path, we reach point B, which we saw on the previous slide, where the claimed route is joined by the Class 6 pathway leading from the Class 4 highway, Bellhurst Drive. The photo on the left shows the continuation of the claimed route looking north to point C, and the second photo on the right of this slide leads to Bellhurst Drive. Now, this Class 6 pathway provides an alternative access as the pinch point at point A is too narrow for users with prams and wheelchairs. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the path then continues in a northeasterly direction for 82 metres to point C, where it meets the existing path MCH13, which is shown in this photo by the tarmac path running left to right. And if we go on to the next slide again, we're standing at point C, but this time we're looking south along the claimed route towards point A. So that covers the appearance of the claimed route. And if we could go on to the next slide, we can see the plan 1B again. And I will now cover, so whilst the report covers documentary evidence first, I would like to cover the user evidence and the consultation responses now, before moving on to the documentary evidence. So as previously mentioned, the applicant provided 22 user evidence statements completed by 22 individuals. This evidence is covered in more detail in section 11 of the report, with a summary of the statements in Appendix 1Q. All 22 users stated that they use the path on foot. However, one user, number 5, has been discounted from the evidence as they describe a private right of access to maintain their rear garden boundary, which abuts the claimed route. This leaves us with 21 supporting user evidence statements. The status of the route was first called into question in 2018, when the parish council carried out improvements to the path surface. For this reason, we're taking the application date as the time that the path was called into question. Therefore, the 20-year period for considering the user evidence is between 1998 and 2018, of which 19 of our users covered the full 20-year period, and the remaining 2 users contributing to the relevant period of time. The earliest use of this path starts in 1931. However, this user, number 8, also notes that this is their birth year, so we could question the user's exact start date. Nonetheless, this user still provides extensive use before 2018 for many decades, even if the earliest years of use are possibly questionable. Overall, user evidence demonstrates extensive use over the qualifying period on foot between points A and C. We also have the responses from the consultation summarised in section 10 of the report. The consultation letters were first sent out in March 2020, but due to the recent circumstances, a second consultation was carried out in September to give a fair chance to all consultees to respond. The County Councillor, the Ramblers Association, Cycling UK, British Horse Society, the Cheltenham County Cycling Club and Sustrans did not respond to their consultation letters. However, Stroud District Council had no objections to nor any comments upon the application to make, and Joe Stewart of the Open Spaces Society first responded in March 2020 to support the application with a request to consider the full boundary-to-boundary width if an order is made, and latterly in September this year to say he had no comment. The most notable response came from the one known landowner, Mr. Wade of Frithwood House, who owns part of the path between points B and C on this plan. The section between A and B is unregistered and no one has approached us claiming ownership. Mr. Wade stated that he had always believed the path to be a public footpath during his family's ownership since 1964, as it was recorded as one on a plan accompanying his conveyance documents. This owner had maintained the path himself to allow public access and has only ever challenged one person who was using a motorcycle along this route. So this brings the user evidence and the consultation responses to an end, and we shall now move on to the documentary evidence, which is the key evidence for this application.
Julia, can we just pause there just a sec?
Yeah.
And I'll take over the video from Joe.
Okay.
Do you want to stop sharing, Joe, and then I'll put mine.
Okay.
I'll help you. Hopefully this will work. Bear with me, Juliet, just as I get them. Okay. Are you into that one there?
No, we've done the photos. It's the Enclosure Award.
That one.
That's the one, thank you. Okay, so now on to the documentary evidence. And we start with the key document, which is the 1869 Bisley Enclosure Award. The importance of the enclosure stems from their value as legal documents, where commissioners were given power to create or extinguish public rights of way, and followed a statutory process. This particular award covered Nasham Common, Bisley Common, Oak Ridge Common, including Bournes Green, Nottingham Scrubs, Dunkill Hill, and outlying pieces of communal wasteland within the parish of Bisley, which did include Chelford at this time. Awards would be accompanied by private acts, which we've been unable to find for this award despite extensive searches of Gloucestershire National Archives and those of Parliament too. However, we can consider the Enclosure or Consolidation Act of 1801, which provided a common framework and standard conditions for subsequent enclosures. Section 8 of this Act provided for the setting out of public carriageway roads and highways. The map accompanying the 1869 Bisley Award is visible on this slide, along with the award text, which sets out a public footpath that includes the claimed route length. So this footway is labelled with what appears to be Roman numerals, and I'll refer to it as footway number 52. It starts at point A in the north, which is outlined by the top red box and also enlarged, although I think the enlargement is hiding behind the viewing Simon Harper's screen, and it travels in a southwesterly direction to a point marked B, shown by the bottom red box. The claimed route can be seen in the middle of footway 52, and this section is outlined with the black rectangle. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Simon. For reference, I have included this plan to show the extent of the Enclosure Award footway number 52 on a modern map, again with the claimed route section highlighted towards the bottom middle of the red length of the Enclosure Award footway. Although no private act has been found for this Enclosure Award, it does appear to have also been set out under the general provisions of the 1801 Act. As such, this award is deemed to be strong evidence that the claimed route was set out as a public footway. Next, we will move on to the creation of the definitive map and statement and an apparent anomaly between the two records. So next slide, thank you. So, as previously mentioned, there does appear to be an anomaly between the definitive map and statement, where the map does not show the claimed route, but the statement does describe it as being a part of a nearby public footpath, MCH 11. As if the definitive map and statement were formed through an extensive legal process subject to consultation and appeal, we can look into the documents which form the creation of the map and statement to see if we can understand what was intended for the length of the claimed route, to explore when this anomaly appeared. Starting with the parish submission, which we can see on this slide here, we can see that the parish originally submitted when asked by the County Council to record rights of way in their parish. In this slide, the claimed route is shown within the red square and marked with a solid green line and the pencil annotation of 1869 award. The key on this map denotes routes marked in green as being rights of way and minor footpaths. The statement submitted with the map, which can be found at Appendix 1H, shows that the claimed route does not have a separate entry, but is included as a part of another footpath, MCH11. And as we can see on this slide, it also has a pencil marking of 11 attached to the green line. It is recorded as starting at the then parish boundary with Bisley at MBL 18 and to the north, then travelling in a southwesterly direction until it joins the Class 4 highway southwest of Frithwood Cottage, which is the very bottom section of the green line in that red box. The listed Ordnance Survey parcel numbers in the statement also correspond with those that we see on the 1924 map. So for this example, so for here that is 232 and 173, where the route marked green passes, as well as referring to the 1869 award again, as it does on the map. This indicates that the parish intended to include the claimed route at the start of the definitive map process. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Next in the process, we have the draft map on the left side of this slide and the modified draft shown on the right. These maps use the same scale as the definitive map, 1:10,560, and use clear coloured markings to show the different categories of prow, public footpaths as shown by purple coloured lines. There are many markings on these maps, as they were often updated with effects of changes to the prow, and examples of these can be seen in the surrounding area. However, both the draft and modified draft maps include the claimed route as coloured purple and included as part of MCH11, with no further annotations to say that changes have affected this section of path. So if we could go on to the next slide. So the provisional map is the precursor to the definitive map, where we first see the familiar bold black markings that we use today on the definitive map. This is where we first see the claimed route as being recorded differently, as we have two maps included in this document. Between some, but not all map pages, there are also insert maps, where certain areas are shown on a larger scale with more detail. The location of the claimed route is one such example. The provisional map, the left image on this slide, shows the area encased in a blue box with a note on the side of the map page saying C 1:2500 inserts of these areas. It does show rights of way within the blue box, as we can see by the black dashed lines, and numbered labels for nearby footpath numbers. So we have 22 to the north, 22 to the south, 13 to the north, and 14 to the east. However, the route shown for MCH11 ends at its junction with 13 immediately west of Frithwood House. It does not extend south along the claimed route to join the Class 4 highway, and this is highlighted by the red box on this image. Whereas the insert map, the right image on this slide, footpaths are shown differently by continuous purple coloured lines in the same manner that we saw in the draft and modified draft maps. The claimed route is shown marked by a purple line and appears to be a continuation of footpath MCH11. These maps have an accompanying provisional statement where the claimed route is also described as being a part of the public footpath MCH11 as it was in the parish submission statement. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So all of these stages lead us to the final product, the definitive map and statement. Here, the anomaly identified between the provisional map and statement appear to have been transferred directly onto the definitive map and statement. The map does not show the claimed route as a public footpath, as can be seen within this red box, whereas the statement does include it as a part of footpath MCH11, thus leaving us with an anomaly between the two records, but with the definitive map taking precedence as set out in the Norfolk case of 2005, the claimed route is not currently recorded as a public footpath. Which leads us to the recommendation. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So again, we go back to our slide of 1B to refresh you of the route between points A and C. And if you go on to the next slide again, please, Simon. It is the officer's view that the user evidence demonstrates an acceptance by the user and the one known partial landowner of the claimed route being a footpath. The documentary evidence shows that the legal dedication of footway number 52, which includes the claimed route in 1869, and the definitive map process suggests that there was intention to include the claimed route. It's possible, but unfortunately impossible to say with any certainty, that a simple act of human error led to the short section of path being excluded from the definitive map. So, Simon, sorry, if you could go back one slide to that plan of 1B.
Yeah, just go in there, hang on.
Thank you. After much consideration of the path's width, whilst this footpath was legally set out in 1869 under an enclosure ward at 5 foot, with no limitations specified, specifically recorded along the length of the claimed route, the historical OS mapping from the 1880s to the 1920s indicates that the eastern side of this path, so the Velhurst Drive and Frithwood House side of the path, was unbounded during that time. And we can only demonstrate that a boundary has existed since the 1970s, i.e. when Velhurst Drive was built, which led to a measurable width of 2 metres being available for use and accepted by the public for the full length from points A to C. We acknowledge the existence of the wall with the 48 centimetre wide pinch point located at point A. However, we have no evidence as to the age of the wall. It may have been contemporary with the original dedication under enclosure or have appeared at some point afterwards. Anecdotal evidence suggests it has existed for over 40 years. So, on the grounds that there is no firm evidence to describe its age, it is the officer's view that it should not be included in any published modification order. However, officers would not actively seek its removal at this time. Therefore, the officer recommends that an order is made to add a length of public footpath between points A and C with a width of 2 metres. So, thank you all.
I'll stop
Any
sharing
questions?
for a second.
Okay.
See people.
Thanks, Juliet. Then we go into the realm of members' questions. Brian Robinson, did I see you indicate? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I was in the wrong section trying to put my hand up. Yeah, my question really stems around this 2 metres and the wall. If we give a public way of 2 metres without commenting on the wall, without including the wall, does that mean that a member of the public can simply request that that it's an obstruction and should be cleared?
Yeah, that could be discussed with the, so in the event that you do instruct me to make the order and it is added to the definitive map, then yes, that could be a comment that is raised with the public rights of way team who maintain existing rights of way, and that would be a discussion that could happen at a later date.
So it could just simply be somebody with a disability or a pushchair that finds it an obstacle and could say, well, actually, it shouldn't be there. Is that right?
Yes, they could, and that's why we're not actively seeking to include it as a limitation within the order. But at the same time, we do accept that that is what's currently in use at the moment, and the parish council don't mind it being there at the moment. So we would be open to have that conversation at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Carol, Phil.
I've got Carol, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just have a little bit of clarity about the recommendation of the case officer on page 11 of the paper notes? In there it states with a width of 5 feet.
Yes. Sorry, I should have said during the presentation that the recommendation had changed since the report was submitted to the agenda pack. So originally I thought 5 foot because it was stated in the enclosure award, but we have since considered that the wider width has been dedicated and accepted by the public. So originally, yes, 5 foot, but taking into account the user evidence, we're now going with a slightly wider width of 2 meters, as is on the ground now.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Carol. I'm looking at my screen. Is anyone else indicating with questions?
Not seeing anyone else.
No, I can't see anybody.
Then it's over to members in relation to a recommendation.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. And a
Seconded. Seconded by Graham.
Yeah.
So if I just put that on the screen, so members of the public and elected members are aware of what they will be voting on. So Carol just clarified, Juliet clarified 2 meters rather than 5 foot. Okay, so that is the motion as it stands before you, and I'll take that off the screen now.
Okay. Now, do you want to go name by name, or do you want just a show of hands?
I can just go through name by name, I think, just to be clear on it. So I'll just quickly run through your names alphabetically, for, against, or abstain. All right. So, Councillor Dr. John Caldwell.
4.
4. Councillor Carriageway Martin.
4.
Councillor Graham Morgan.
4.
4. Councillor John Payne.
We lost him.
Yeah, we got John there. Hang on. I can see John. Hang on. He's talking. We
You're
can hear
muted, John.
Let's see if we can. Can you just unmute John? Let's just pick him up. So I tell you what, John. If you're 4, can you put your thumbs up? A thumb up. Yeah. Okay. I'm taking that as a 4 from John. Councillor Brian Robinson. 4. 4. Councillor Robert Vines.
4.
4. Councillor Simon Wheeler.
4.
4. And finally, the committee chair, Councillor Phil Orford.
4.
4. So that's 8 votes in favour, and we've got 1 apology. So that's unanimous and carried.
Thank you. Okay. We'll now move on to our agenda item 6, which, 7, which I believe is going to be presented by Jackie Harris. Are you there, Jackie?
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to start with your presentation, please?
Okay. My presentation is with regard to an application for a length of path in the parish of Up Hatherley, which since 1991 has been part of Cheltenham Borough Council. Prior to that, it formed part of Sherdington Parish and therefore came under the jurisdiction of Tewkesbury Borough Council. The application has been submitted by Up Hatherley Parish Council in June of 2018. Now, I'd like to just make a comment here. If you could turn to JH1, Simon, please.
Bear with me, Jackie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. The application, there is no documentary evidence submitted in support of this application, and that's because the land that this path crosses, that you can see sitting within the red rectangular box, was formerly land owned by ourselves, Gloucestershire County Council, as Bryson House Farm. And in the early 90s, the land was sold off to developers and they constructed the housing estate that we can see today. And I think we can infer that the claim path, which the user evidence dates back to the same time, about 1990, has really come about through the construction of the development, the housing estate. There is no documentary prior to that across this, along this alignment. Now, the application is for a public footpath, as I've said, and I just want to stop at the moment and make a bit of a comment and then open it up to you as to whether you want to make any comments yourself. And then after that, I would like to park it on one side and forget about it. All very misleading and devious and curious, I know, but we have had, in our consultation, we had a response from a gentleman called John Newbury, representing, oh, hang on a minute, I've just got to check the name of the organisation that he represents. Sorry, Living Streets, it just went out of my head, which, if you look online, appears to be an organisation that promotes, in the main, pedestrian access. Now, he advised us as part of the consultation that his organisation intended to object because this application is for a footpath and we were excluding cyclists. Now, he drew in a colleague, another cyclist enthusiast called John Mallows, and he represents the Cycling UK and also Cheltenham and Tewkesbury Cycling Campaign. Now, John Mallows came at this from a point of view not of objection, but as more of an opportunity. Is this an opportunity to create a cycle track and add it to Cheltenham's existing network of cycle routes? I wrote to both guys, John Newbury in January of this year and then John Mallows in May, and I outlined what this process really is about and basically advised them that it's evidence-based, whether documentary, user, a mixture of both. We can't take into account issues such as suitability or desirability into account. And although I said that although the claim is for a public footpath, if they had evidence of higher rights of use of the path by cyclists, then forward it to us, because although the application is for a footpath, if there's sufficient evidence on the balance of probability of higher rights, we can make an order for those higher rights to reflect the cycle use. I had absolutely no response to that email. In preparing this presentation, I went over it with our legal colleague, Claire, who's with us today, and she noticed that the email that I sent to John Mallows was sent during the first lockdown in May. And so she suggested that I contacted both again, reminded them of the process, the presentation today, and asked them if they wanted to contribute anything at all. I did that. I emailed them both on the 4th of November, so they've had just literally under a month. And I've had absolutely no response from either. That's really what I want to say at this point, that with regard to yourselves as councillors in determining this application, you can only determine it on the evidence that is included in this report. But it could be that if you direct me to make an order for a footpath, we may have an objection at a later date. I just don't know. Now, that's all I really wanted to say with regard to that. Just wanted to highlight the fact that there could be cycling groups that will get a little bit more activated if we make an order. Does anyone want to make a comment at that point before I sort of push it to one side and ignore it?
If you hang on just a sec, Jackie,
Yep.
if anyone indicates.
Let me just stop. I'm just going to stop sharing a second, Jackie, just so we can see anybody waving at the screen or that wanted to. Yeah, Simon Wheeler,
Yes.
I wanted to make a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should really know the answer to this one, but just thinking, because I think I've heard rumblings of that. So if there was a right to, we did have the evidence for a right to use pedal cycles across this route. Would that also include horses?
No, we'd be looking at creating a restricted byway. I suppose, yes, horses potentially, yes, could use a restricted byway, but since 2006, the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act, any use by bikes would result in a restricted byway. And so, yes, you're right, horses could potentially use it.
Okay, Simon.
Can't see any other. Can't see anyone else indicating for.
No.
Okay.
We'll go back to Jackie. We'll just go back then. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Carry on, Jackie.
Right. Okay. So could you go to the next slide, please, Simon?
It might just take a second for the
Yep.
just to recognise that it's here. Hang on. There we go.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let's take a better look then at the actual path that has been claimed. The path that's been claimed is shown by a black broken line and runs between point A at its junction with Cheriton Park and point F at its junction with Jasmine Way. Now you'll note that there is a further section of path shown as between points G, H and I, which is shown with the blue broken line. Now, this section of path was not included in the original application, but in analysing the user evidence that was submitted in support of it, it shows that the public did actually use this section as well. So they used the path from A to I right the way up to Farmfield Road. And so today I've included it in this presentation, and I will be asking you to determine that section of path as well as the application. You'll notice that there are two alternative paths, one between section A to B and one between section E to F. Now, you'll have noticed at the end of the report there are 6 recommendations that I'll actually be making. I have 2 recommendations based on those 2 sections of path, which I'll go through through the presentation. Right, so let's start by looking at the photos and have a look at the character of all of these different sections. You'll note that roads bisect the various sections, so that it's quite neatly been broken down into 4 sections: A to B, C to D, E to F and G, H, I. So let's start off with the first section, section A to B. Can you go back to that slide, please, Simon? Sorry, I know we're sort of going into the photos, but I just want to explain at this point the difference between the original path and the alternative. So we have a path running between A to B. As I said before, the black broken line is the path actually set out by the applicant in his plan, and it's also the route that was claimed by all the people submitting user evidence. Now that section A to B crosses a retail park. You've got a Morrison's superstore there, you've got a petrol station, a community centre, a library, a doctor's and even a pub in that area. Now, when the applicant was corresponding with us, he made a statement that raised a few alarm bells with us. That statement is found in paragraph 11.32 of the report, and I'll read it to you. It's just a brief statement, but he said, so with regard to the section of path, sorry, I didn't say, in the middle where, Simon, you've got your red box, yes, that is a car park. So in other words, the applicant and all the users showed a path, drew a path diagonally across that car park. But what he said in relation to that section of path across the car park was, I noted that this was more a desire line and that the actual route would likely be around the outside. So what we did was we wrote back to the applicant and to all the members, the individuals that actually claimed that section of path A to B, we sent them a larger scale map and we asked them to actually mark on the route they used with regard to the car park. So although we had 15 original, including the applicant, members of the public that originally claimed a diagonal path across the car park, when we sought clarification, we had only 4 people that continued to assert and claim the path diagonally across the car park. 12, which included one of the ones that claimed both. He claimed path diagonally across the car park and also around. We had 12 members of the public, 12 individuals that actually clarified that the path they used at this point was around the car park, which is why I will have 2 recommendations for you. One for the original route as shown by the applicant between A to B, and the second that I've annotated or called A to Alt 1 to B, which will be the same length of path but around the car park. Now, Simon, could we look at the photos? Could you take me through the next photo, please? So this is the path. Standing where I am here, taking the photo, I've got Cheriton Park behind me. You can see that the path is a well-maintained pavement. You've got the community building on the left. If you could go to the next slide, please. This shows the path continuing out onto one of the private access roads that are included across this retail park. And you've got the petrol station in front. If you go to the next slide, please, Simon. This is the point where we have this question over where people were walking. So originally, the 15 individuals claimed a path diagonally across that car park, but upon clarification, the majority, 12, walked around the outside. Now, when we think about sufficiency of user, we have to rely for this process, for the analysis of the user evidence, we rely on case law that has gone in the past to help us. And at this point, we can consider a Dorset case of 1999, where the judge at that time was faced with 5 user evidence forms. And although he didn't doubt their truthfulness or veracity, he concluded that those 5 were not sufficient to carry a claim of dedication. That's why I have 2 recommendations for this stretch of path, because the one across the path, now diagonally across, has only got 4 individuals who are claiming use of it. So could you go on to the next slide, please, Simon? And this is the end of that section A to B, where it meets looking towards Carnarvon Road at point B. Again, we can see it's a good, well-maintained path. So next slide, please. Now, taking you back, I'm going to keep doing this. In between each of the 4 sections, we'll come back to this slide just to remind you of where we are in the application. So we've crossed over Carnarvon Road at point B. We're now standing at point C, and we're going to be considering the section C to D. Now, this is a length of path. If you could go to the next slide, please, Simon. Thank you. It starts off with a 10-11 metre length of tarmac path, and then it opens out into an area of green space that's designated by Cheltenham Borough Council as De Villiers Drive open space. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So this area of green space provides pedestrian access from 2 of the adjacent highways called Crichton Walk and De Villiers Drive. But you'll note that it is literally what it says on the can. It is an area of green space. There is no pavement, no paved path, no street lights, no nothing across it. Next slide, please. And this is the end near point D, where we join up with public footpath CHU 8. You go to the next slide, please. And it should be JH2 again. So this next section we're looking at is section E to F. Now here again, we have an alternative path. This section of path, E to F, and if you could just stay on this slide just for a second, Simon, crosses an area of green space land again, designated by Cheltenham Borough Council as Jasmine Way or Justicia Way open space. But you'll see that across the top of it, we have the claim path that is shown by the black broken line, but we've also got a red line there, and that denotes the fact that this section of path is currently recorded on one of our own highway records, the list of streets, which, as you know, is a record of our publicly maintainable highways. Now, the applicant, Simon, if you could just lower that red marker, please. Thank you. That's just a bit more so I can see the black hashed line that's just above it. So the applicant claimed the path between points E and F for 2/3 along this Class 6 highway that's shown on the list of streets, and then he deviated off it. Now, if we could now go to the photos of this section of path, thank you, we can see that the character of this path is entirely different to the previous one that we've just looked at. So we've got chicanes, we actually have chicanes at either end, we've got waste bins, we have a constructed tarmac path meandering through it. Could you go to the next slide, please? And it would be entirely unsurprising. This is a Class 6 highway that was constructed at the time of the development of this area, this property, this estate. We not only have that constructed, well-maintained path, we also have 5 street lamps located along this path. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And this is just the end of the point F, where again we have the chicane. Could you just go back to the last slide, Simon? Thanks. Now, what the applicant did was he drew the claim path as following this Class 6 highway for, say, 2/3 of its length, and then for some reason he deviated so that people would walk across the area of grass before returning back to the access point or the exit point at point F. It seemed a little bit strange, so I contacted him and just to clarify which route he actually meant to claim. And he did say his response is held at. Sorry, just got to check it. Yes, his emailed response is found in paragraph 11.30, where he said, "I'm rather confused by your description of the section E to F as a road. This is actually a tarmac footpath, and this is what we wish to claim." So, if we can go on, Simon, just so we get back to the map. The next one, please. Next, thank you. So, still focusing on section E to F, the applicant drew that path which shows it deviating from the Class 6 highway, the red line, but what he clarified, what he meant to claim was the whole of the Class 6 highway, which is shown by the red line. So again, turning back, you'll have noticed in my report, I've got a table of the number of users that used the various sections of path. And you'll see that for section E to F, only the applicant and one other person claimed the path as he drew it on his map where it deviates from the path. And using the case law of Dorset of 1999, this also would be insufficient user evidence for a claim of presumed dedication. However, the number of users for E alt 2 to F is sufficient. If I turn to the table briefly, the section E to F wholly along the Class 6 highway was 14 individuals, so that would be sufficient to carry a claim of presumed dedication. So let's go on to look at the next section, G to H to I. Now, before you go on to the next slide, Simon, I'd just like to say that this section here I want you to bear in mind, before we look at the photos, this section is a private path on private land. It has no highway designation whatsoever at the moment. So it's not like the previous section, E to F, where it's recorded as a Class 6 highway. So Simon, could you turn to the next photo, please? This is point G. Does it remind you, is it similar to the route that we've just looked at, section E to F? We have a notice board on the left, which is actually the Parish Council's notice board. We've got a waste bin. We've got a tarmac, well-maintained tarmac path that has been set out and actually goes to the whole length through GHI to Farmfield Road. And you'll see in the distance that there are also street lamps. Could you go to the next slide, please, Simon? There are actually 11 street lamps along this section of path G to H to I. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And the next one. Thanks. So you can see this is the character of section G to H to I. It is almost exactly the same as the previous section we've looked at, E to F. It's got the tarmac path and it's got 11 street lamps. It's a private path, it's got no highway designation, but GCC is maintaining the street lights and has done since they installed them and has maintained them ever since, to the point where 18 months ago, where all the street lamps were changed over and upgraded, these were too. We could ask the question then, why? Why are we maintaining street lamps on a length of path that is private? And for the answer to that, there is a section 106 agreement dated, let me just go back to 11.20 of the report. It details this document. A 106 agreement under the Town and Country Planning Act, which is dated the 27th of February 1991. And this document provided for a new public footpath. Could you just flick back, Simon, a couple of slides so we get back to JH2? I think it's easier to use that slide. Thank you, that one there. It provided for a new public footpath to be created so as to link AHU 12, which was subsequently renamed CHU 8, i.e. it's point E, through phase 3, so while the development was going on, to Farmfield Road, through the proposed open space hereinafter referred and as shown on the plan. So there was a proposal, there was an intention at the start of this construction, of this development, this housing estate, for a public footpath to link all the way through from section E to I, so from the public footpath to Farmfield Road. It appears to have happened. Section E to F, as we've already considered, was adopted and put onto the list of streets as a Class 6 highway, but for some reason section G to H to I was not, and yet we are still maintaining aspects of that path. Now, I'll just mention something here. I'll raise something that is absolutely irrelevant. Well, it's not totally irrelevant to the application, but it's not part of your consideration. And that is that during my last few months investigating this application, I've been negotiating with Cheltenham Borough Council with regard to this path. Because if you direct me to make an order for a footpath across this section, then we are potentially giving the Public Rights of Way team a very heavy burden with regard to maintenance. So we have now got to the point where Cheltenham Borough Council have agreed to submit to us an application under 228 the Highways Act for section G to H to I to be added to the list of streets. As Class 6 highway, whatever it is, it will be hopefully added to that document. In the same way, therefore, that section E to F is. And then that means that the maintenance for that section of path thereafter will it'll come out of a much bigger pot of the highways team. So Before we start looking at the user evidence, as we said, there is no documentary evidence. One thing we have to consider, and it was picked up by Carol at the pre-meeting that we had, and that is section A, Cheriton Park. Point A joins and starts or terminates at point A. Now, you'll know from training that for a successful claim, there has to be a termination point for these paths, either at an existing highway or a place of popular resort. We can see when we look at those various sections, B to C is at Carnarvon Road, D to E connects with an existing footpath, a highway. Section F and G is at Jasmine Way, and section I is Farmfield Road. But section A doesn't link with a highway, so can we say that Cheriton Park therefore constitutes a place of popular resort? The question perhaps we should ask first is, what does constitute a place of popular resort? Well, quite simply, it's land provided for the enjoyment of the public. And a couple of examples that we could consider for this is the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, that has a birthday today, apparently, that we know as the Crow Act 2000. That created public rights for people on foot to various designated areas of land across England and Wales that are known as access land. So they all form places of popular resort. We could also consider the Forestry Commission land. If you remember Andrew's report from October and also mine, we both had applications that were in the Forest of Dean, and we both referred to the report that set out public rights for members of the public across land, the statutory Forest of Dean and the satellite forests from as early as 1938. So that land would be considered to be a place of popular resort. So can we say that Cheriton Park is also? Well, there is a covenant that was executed in 1995 between the developers and Cheltenham Borough Council. It was executed under the Open Spaces Act of 1906, and it stated, I'll just read from paragraph 11.14 of my report, the council covenants with the transferors that the council will maintain the property as open space for the enjoyment of the public and will hold the property for the purposes of the Open Spaces Act 1906. So on that basis, the land there was provided for the enjoyment of the public, and therefore we can say that Cheriton Park would constitute a place of popular resort. So let's turn to the user evidence and see what have we got. Simon, could I ask you to flick forward about, I think it's 4 slides to, it's a bar chart. Thank you, that's the one. The summary of user evidence in association with this application is held as JH4 as part of your report. But here, I've put together a bar chart of the users. So if you remember, we have got 18 public path evidence forms that were submitted by 19 individuals. And we can see them all here set out with the horizontal blue lines. And that denotes their use, their claimed use of this path. We can see the vertical line in red that denotes the 20 years. So we can see from that that we have got, in terms of public use, we have got all of them, everyone, claiming part or all of the 20 years usage of this path. And what I've actually missed and gone straight past, so I'm sorry, I'll just take you one step backwards. In talking about the user evidence, I say this so often, I get to the point where I know that you all know all this, but I will just go over it again. The user evidence is found in section 31 of the Highways Act, subsection 1 and 2. And we're looking at use. The test that's supplied there is use by the public for a period of at least 20 years, and use must be as of a right without force, secrecy or permission. So I should have said that just before I went into the this bar chart. We need to establish the 20 years for which we'll analyse the user evidence. Now, normally we would look at something that challenged the public's use or brought their use into question, such as the path being fenced off or notices going up saying, "Get off my land," type of thing. But we have nothing in association with this application, and so therefore we will be using section 69 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, which allows us to rely on the application date itself, which, as I said at the start, was 2018. So that gives us the 20-year qualifying period of 1998 to 2018. So now we come on to the bar chart, and we can see there that we have got 19 individual members of the public that claim to have used the path over part or all of that qualifying period. And of those, we have got 5 that claim to have used the path over the whole 20-year period. Now, let's have a look next at the user as of right part of the test. As we know, that test is threefold. We've got use. Use must be for a successful claim without force, without secrecy, and without permission. Now, we can say that there is no evidence, the user evidence forms do not show any evidence that there is use by force or secrecy over the whole route from A to I, which includes the extension of the application path. And when we consider sections C to D, there is no evidence of any issues with regard to permission. With sections C to D, we can say here and now would be as of right, because it was without secrecy or permission. When we look at the issue of permission, however, we are going to have to consider section A to B, E to F, and G to H to I. So if we can take the sections E to F and G to H to I first. The reason I've highlighted those and said that we need to consider the issue of permission closely is because those two sections cross land that are subject to exactly the same covenant that Cheriton Park is. So in other words, there is an existing right of access under the Open Spaces Act of 1906, whereby the public can use this land for recreation. Now, where there is an easement, where there's a private right, whether expressly or inferred by the landowner, we would say that this use would be by right, not as of right, and therefore that would defeat this claim. However, we can again fall back on the case law that guides our work and consider a bit of case law that we refer to. We have, I think, referred to it quite often in our last few applications, and that is Bilson of 1998. Just to remind you of that case, it referred to a common which was subject to a deed executed under section 193 of the Law of Property Act of 1925, and it granted the public a right of air and exercise, and therefore use would be across that common by right. However, Justice Sullivan in that case submitted that, and he accepted that if a track used across that common was not used for the purpose of air and exercise, but was used for a different purpose, i.e. use as a highway, then it could potentially be capable of resulting in a successful claim of deemed dedication. So turning to our application here at Hatherley, what we've really got to consider with sections E to F and G to H to I is, can we distinguish between use of those sections as a highway as opposed to the recreational rights that were assigned under the private easement of the Open Spaces Act of 1906. There are a few things we can consider here. First of all, we've got the section 106 agreement that provided and shows that there was an intention for those two sections to have a public footpath, a highway across them. Second, we can consider the physical characteristics of the route. You have a tarmac path that has adjacent street lighting that are maintained by the County Council as the Highway Authority. We can look at the statements made by the 19 users in the user evidence forms, which show that they answered no to did they require or use the path with any permission. They all responded no, but what they didn't say was that they used it under knowledge of a private easement. Not one of the individuals noted the Open Spaces Act 1906, which provided for a private right. So if they didn't need permission, they were using this path as of a right. They felt they had a right to use it. And putting all those things together, therefore, we can say that we can distinguish that the sections E to F and G to H to I, although they are both subject to this private easement, we can distinguish use of these sections of path as a highway, and therefore they would allow us to consider them as consider this application of deemed dedication. Now, section A to, I will say, Alt 1 to B requires a slightly different take and consideration of that same issue of permission under the as of right test. Where the other sections were subject to an existing private right of access, what we have here is a retail park where the landowner is expressly encouraging by notices and the shops. He wants the public to visit his retail park. He wants people to go and buy their sausages from Morrison's. He wants people to go and get their petrol at the petrol station, visit the pub. So he's inviting people to come to his retail park. Now, we've seen through the user evidence that users obviously stated that they used this path to go to Morrison's, to go to the pub, to go to the community centre. But they also claimed use of this section of path for recreational walking, dog walking, and also to participate in a weekly health walk, which is organised by the Cheltenham Trust. So that use would be as of right. Now, we could say at this point, surely we are being unfair to the landowner here. How can a landowner distinguish between use to his establishment that he's encouraging and use that he doesn't know anything about, but maybe is as of right as a recreational path? Well, this is where we have to fall back on the Highways Act. It not only sets out the test, the statutory test, that we have to analyse the user evidence against, it also sets out ways that a landowner can protect himself from such claims, particularly in areas like this where he cannot distinguish use that is by right that he encourages and as of right that perhaps he wouldn't. Section 31.3 of the Highways Act, as you know, allows landowners to erect notices to the effect that this is not a right of way. I am not dedicating this path for public use. Section 31.6 allows him to deposit a map and statement with us as the Highway Authority, stating that he acknowledges any rights of way across his land or not, whatever the case is, and no others. And as long as he continues the process supplying statutory declarations as required, then that will protect him from any claims such as this. I've done some research. I looked at the buildings. I couldn't find any plaques or notices that the landowner had put up with regard to not dedicating the path. And there is no section 31.6 that has been lodged with us. So I'm afraid, we can only go so far. That is what the evidence shows. The landowner has not taken sufficient steps to make his feelings known and his lack of intention to dedicate known. So when we turn to What we're really saying is that the use of these 4 sections of path is by members of the public, sufficient members of the public, over the 20-year period. We've got that as well, and we can say that we can distinguish use where we need to, and that use is as of right. It's without forced secrecy or permission, and therefore we can say that it's a claim of presumed dedication of a public footpath has taken place. At this point, we usually look back at the landowner's evidence to see whether he has done anything to show his lack of intention to dedicate. And as I've just said, not just with point A to B, but also Cheltenham Borough Council as well with regard to the other sections of path. They haven't done anything to show overtly to members of the public using the path that although they may have a right to be there under the Open Spaces Act, they are not actually dedicating this path as a footpath. There is a notice at point H on the section G to H to I, which is part of their bylaws, and it's with regard to the playing of ball games in that area. So they're aware, of their bylaws, their ability to create them. They had that opportunity to similarly put a notice up there, or even add a comment, a statement to that existing notice to the effect that we are not dedicating this land as a public footpath. So this report has found that there is insufficient evidence. There is no evidence really on behalf of the landowners involved to show that they did anything overtly to try and show the public that they were not intending to dedicate this path, any part of this path. Can I ask you, Simon, to go to the last slide, please? I think it's the next one. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, this one. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just briefly sum up the various sections, because there are 6 recommendations that I'm putting forward to you. So section A to B, we have 2 recommendations. The first is just the path A to B as shown and drawn by the applicant with the path diagonally across the car park. My recommendation is that we do not make an order for that on the basis of insufficiency of evidence. If you'll remember, we only have 4 users after clarification who claimed use of that path across the car park. My second recommendation with regard to that point A to B is that an order be made to add a public footpath along the claim section A to Alt 1 to B, which is around the car park. My third recommendation is that an order should be made to add the section of public footpath along the claimed route C to D. My fourth recommendation, and again this section E to F, we have 2. The first one is that no order be made to add a public footpath along section E to F as shown by the applicant on his plan. If you remember, we only had 2 individuals who claimed that length of path where the applicant showed the path deviating from the Class 6 highway. The second recommendation with regard to that section E to F is that an order be made to add a public footpath along section E to Alt 2 to F, which is basically the whole of the Class 6 highway. Now, just before I go on to the last one, I'd just like to, there's one last point that should be made now that I'm making the recommendation with regard to E to F. You may be wondering why, if this path is already recorded on the list of streets, it's already recorded as a highway, why are we seeking to add it to the definitive map? Why are we making this recommendation? Well, quite simply, this application has come through under the auspices of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. We have that application, and it's our duty to consider the evidence that's been supplied. And if there is sufficient evidence on the balance of probability, we have no choice but to add it to the definitive map. So yes, although the list of streets, which doesn't accord a status, but at least, you know, the lowest status of path is a footpath. So the list of streets is at least recording a footpath right. Even though we have that recorded there separately, we will end up with, if you direct me to make the order, another the section of footpath being added to the definitive map as well. So we will have sort of a dual classification along that section. So my last recommendation is that an order be made to add the section of public footpath along the claimed route G to H to I. And that is on the basis, if you'll remember, that may become dual classified in the future as well, if Cheltenham Borough submit a section 228 to us. So those are my recommendations. Have you got any queries?
I'll stop sharing so we can see everyone.
Okay.
So Simon, you've got Simon Wheeler, Phil. I'm just looking at other members that might want to speak at the moment.
Yeah.
And Simon first.
Yes. Just a quick clarification on the points you've just been talking about. I always understood that they couldn't, you couldn't be on both maps, the definitive and the map of streets. Now, if you're telling me that that's not the case and they can be on both, then I'm absolutely happy. But just really wanted to clarify that point.
They're completely different documents. The list of streets is a record of publicly maintainable highways, but it provides no guidance with regard to status. The definitive map is a process that is based on consultation and appeals, and therefore it is conclusive evidence of the information that is shown on it. So they are completely separate documents, and they can be recorded on both.
Okay.
Although, sorry, I was just going to say, yes, it is a bit weird when you're looking to put a footpath on a definitive map when you've already got it on a Class 6 highway, but you know, it's a different document.
Did you want to come back, Simon?
No, just to say thank you for that, because that's clear that's something that I thought was contrary. And if this is going to be on the map of streets and GCC maintaining it, as you said much earlier in the meeting, I didn't want to rob rights of way of cash to maintain it when we could have GCC doing the job.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else with a question?
No other members are indicating, as far as I can see.
I am really surprised because it was so complicated.
But it's probably that you've done a good job on it then.
I was going to say the same thing. You've done an excellent job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Chair, so I just pop the recommendation up again so everyone can see it, and then members of the public that are viewing can see it as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So the members are then clear what they're voting on as well. I know it's been ably explained.
Well, voting when we've got a recommendation. I'm looking for recommendations from members. Is anybody prepared to
take it off the screen?
Yeah.
I am happy to recommend that as officers suggest.
And it's been seconded by Graham as well, I think.
Okay, then pop it back up, Simon. Sorry.
Yeah.
There
we are.
Lovely. Okay, then are you going to take us through the vote as you did before in alphabetical?
Yes. So we'll take that on block then.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll just take it back off the screen, and then I'll go through everybody alphabetically as before. For, against, or abstain. So Councillor Dr. John Caldwell.
For.
For. Councillor Carol Alloway Martin. For. Councillor Graham Morgan. For. Councillor John Payne. For. Councillor Brian Robinson. For Councillor Robert Vines. For Councillor Simon Wheeler.
For.
And you, Chair, Councillor Phil Alford.
4.
So that, as before, is unanimous. 8 members in support of the application. We've got one apology. So that's carried.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda then. at item.
We're on to item 8, public questions.
Yeah, public questions. Joe, have we had any?
None received.
And 9, member questions.
No, none received.
Okay. Graham, yes. Sorry, he's on mute.
All right, just to say, Chair, that it's already been said, but I'd like to congratulate both officers on excellent presentations. And I think Juliet said it was her first, so yeah, very, very good and easy to understand. It must be hard work, but excellent presentations. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I'd say exactly the same. Once we stop the podcast, can I ask officers just to stay online a sec? Once you finish the broadcast, if we
so you just wanted to congratulate the officers?
Would you like me to
would you like to end the YouTube broadcast, please, Anne?